Yeah, hello and welcome to our webinar, Two Sides of the PAM Coin. My name is Manuela Ollhäuser. I'm Marketing Manager at the SC Consult Group, and with me today are our presenters, Stefan Schweizer, Vice President of Sales in the DACH region from Thycotic Centrify, and Johannes Hauer, Senior Consultant, PAM at ISD Consult. Before I hand over to them, just some quick housekeeping topics from my side. You will all be on mute during the whole webinar. So if you have a question during the webinar, please type in your questions in the questions panel, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. The webinar will be recorded so that you will all receive an email with a link to this recording within the next few days. Yeah, and that's all from my side. Then I hand over to you, Stefan.
Thank you, fantastic. Hey, hello, and welcome everybody here from my home office. You can see the plants in the background, and just the sun came out, and it was a kind of shining over my head. So maybe that could repeat in the next minutes again. So I'm sitting here in Munich in my home office. My name is Stefan Schweizer. I'm responsible for the business here in the DACH region. I'm very proud to say that I'm allowed to present to you today, together with Johannes. Me coming from the Thycotic Centrify side, and me personally coming from the Thycotic part of the Thycotic Centrify business.
Yeah, also from me, warm welcome. My name is Johannes Hauer, and I'm working within IC Consult in the PAM team, and I'm working in the PAM section since a bit more than 6 years.
Fantastic, yeah. Thank you, Johannes. So usually, I call my presentation, and this is why I left the headline on the presentation, the daily password madness. And this is what we experience, at least we from the vendor side, every day with our customers. And you as a customer, obviously, not only as a customer working in your operations, but also as a private person, operating daily with your PC or Mac in your home office or private-wise after hours. I would say every day, right? So for years and now, we got used to, set up a password on every web page we are going to, and every day we are struggling in trying to log into our accounts, forgot our passwords, rename our passwords, are being forced to rename our passwords, and this leads not only to us as a private person, but also us as a company and as a company scenario to scenarios where day in, day out, we can read in the newspapers that sites got breached, companies got breached, and in 8 out of 10 cases, it has to do with identity theft, and stolen passwords. So unfortunately, I have a just here from the Heise news ticker article presenting for you in German, stating that the water supply system in Miami got breached and in Florida got breached by over 100,000 servers. And it turned out that servers and the whole system in the background was protected by one common password between several thousand servers implemented on a Windows 7 machine, which is already 12 or 14 years old now and got never changed in the past. So hacks like that are occurring day in, day out, and are not happening rarely. So just the other day, Wall Street Journal reported that hackers had stolen 50 million customer accounts out of a password store out of T-Mobile, and not only that password store was not saved properly and not protected properly, but that also means that 50,000 or 50 millions of customers in the US that are T-Mobile customers are now, open to get breached because hackers know their accounts and password details. And the question is, can we find a way around that even when it got breached, even when you lost your password and your identity, we have maybe good chances to repair the whole system and get back in business in an uninterruptible way.
Yeah, so as everybody know, cybercrime is focuses focus more and more on companies because there is the money and there are the information they want to have, and that's a risk of the modern world, as every company which want to sell their products or their stuff have to be added to the internet and use modern technologies, and therefore they are in focus of cybercrime. And here we can separate between two kind of attacks. The first one is the random attack. They're spread in large numbers in the net, and hopefully they will find victims and infect them with malware or adware or spyware. But for companies, the more dangerous attacks are the targeted, because the attacks are focused to a selected victim, and the goal is always to steal information and sell them, or take that information and do stuff with it. And they are difficult to fend off because they use attacks they already looked for, and they know what difficulties the customer have. And in 80% of all security incidents, I guess the number raised in the last couple of years, privileged users or privileged access is involved. So Stefan, you can go to the next slide. So the facets of the cybercrime is that there are different motivations, but the way they are using to get the foot in the door is nearly always the same. They are using security flaws, social engineering, and they are using the complexity of the systems to find breaches nobody knows or nobody's aware of. And at least carelessness, as Stefan said, not changing passwords, using the same passwords for several users. And that's always a big problem. So next slide, Stefan. So there are 6 steps attackers following. So first is identify security flaws, then get initial access, strengthen position, means take a look at the infected system, what else we can find, and then the target is to steal privileged credentials, such as a domain administrator. And if you have such an account, you can access a lot of other systems and almost critical systems, access databases, and then you can take a look around in the environment, locate the data you want to have, and then collect and steal. Of course, this is very high level, but that's the way it works. Next slide. And the problem here is why privileged accounts are nearly always part of an attack is that for the customers, it's very hard to manage them, because in most companies there's no individual accountability. They are using external access from other vendors. They have hard-coded credentials in code because there's no other way to do it. And of course, internal threats. And if you take a look in your own environment and see how many systems you have and how many accounts per system, then or how many privileged accounts, then you see it's very challenging to reach the security standards, like change the passwords every month or use complex passwords. So without a tool which is doing that, it's very hard to do it manually. Next slide. So in most cases, we have a bunch of different access types and a lot of different access sources. And for every asset, there are different requirements related to authentication or security behaviors, and there are a lot of options to use privileged access. So you can use it from teleworking or on-site in the office. You're accessing directly to a web application or via VPN to an on-site data center. And for the company, it's hard to see what activities related to privileged accounts or access happens. And therefore, it's hard to protect the privileged access based on conventional security methods like firewall, password rules, or vaulting, because at least you cannot see what is happening and who's using it.
Yes, okay. Unbelievable. Huh? So two things are coming together here, right? So on the one hand side, it's very hard for companies to see who had accessed what and when, who had done what changes in the system, who had come into the system and who had left the system. On the other hand side, you, due compliance reasons, are forced to have that data, obviously. And you know, that are, I would say, the two sides of the coin, right? On the one hand side, it's hard to do. On the other hand side, it's mandatory for you to do that. So the question now then is, you know, how to implement that. On top also comes that, and this is the interesting part, and this is not only what we are saying here from the consultant side and from the vendor side, but also what Gartner is stating and Forrester that we saw, you know, in the previous slides, stating that 80%, so 8 out of 10 cyber attacks are directly involved with stolen credentials. And if you could only take care of your stolen credentials and of your credentials as such, and the credentials obviously in the IT systems and the identities are considered to be the crown jewels in the IT departments, that would immediately you know, bring you on 400% forward on your cyber surface. And this is why Gartner is saying now for 3 years in a row, if you're about to spend only $1 in cybersecurity, you must spend that in the PAM sector and in the PAM space. So you have to protect your privileged accounts. And then obviously with this comes the question, what is a privileged account, right? So you as an administrator of your machine, are you already an administrative account or you know, interesting account to be stolen? And the answer obviously is yes. And we saw that in the cyber kill chain that Johannes was mentioning a moment ago, that, you know, obviously the intent of the hacker is to elevate their privileges on the account as such in the first place, and then operate as an administrator in your system. So, and this is why Gartner is saying you need to spend your first dollar and your last dollar in the PAM space in order to make that environment secure, obviously. So why is this an issue? And I'm always showing, you know, my home scenario, right? My private home scenario. So I'm operating on different websites. You can see that, you know, I'm, you know, operating here on Amazon and Amazon UK. I have an account because every once in a while I'm sending stuff to my colleagues in UK. I have an Airbnb account and an ADP. This is where I guarantee you know, vacations to my workforce, and a lot of other accounts and websites. And this comes with cloud computing, obviously, that you're not operating only on your machine, but, you know, most of your stuff is being done in the browser. So therefore, most employees, and I by myself, am very thankful that in this case, you know, Google Chrome as a browser is taking care of my passwords. So, and you know that by your own, and if you're, you know, honest by your heart, you know and realize that when Google asks you, shall I save that password on your behalf, you are thankful and say yes, because next time you don't have to remember anymore. But this comes with an implication, right? So now Google knows your password and your Google account knows your password. That means the password you're operating on your Google machine or on your Google browser in the office is being replicated in the background through Google to your private PC. So next time when you start your private Google browsing on your home machine in your, you know, not home office, but as a private person, you know, they know their passwords as well. So this is, you know, kind of scenario where, you know, most employees fall into the trap of, you know, letting the browser store the password. Then obviously I'm working here on a Macintosh. So Macintosh as such has a system in the background saying, it's called keychain, Apple keychain. So Apple is asking me, shall I save that password? So every time I open my Outlook, I don't have to enter the passwords anymore because Apple is taking care of that. So Apple is saving my passwords as well. So now this is the second place where passwords are stored on my machine. Then obviously I have a mobile phone, and on the mobile phone I'm not using Google Chrome. I'm using the Safari browsing. Right, Safari browsing works perfectly on my iPhone. So Safari as such on my iPhone is saving the passwords as well. And then obviously I have Safari on my Macintosh as well, beside the Google Chrome, which not replicates to my iPhone because my iPhone operates on my private Apple ID and the company PC operates on a different Apple ID. So they are saving passwords as well. So if you don't take care, you come very easily into a situation where you find yourself in a scenario where every employee has 6 or 7 or even up to 10 different places where passwords are stored. So now just imagine a company with 1,000 employees. And this is to be considered, the standard German Mittelstand, right? 1,000 employees working on machines, PCs, laptops, whatsoever. 1,000 employees, you have 10,000 places where passwords are stored in your company. And quite obviously, I don't have to mention that, but quite obviously, you can't protect 10,000 different places in your environment. So there must be a way around that. And I haven't even spoken now about, 10 administrators taking care of 1,000 servers. This is a different scenario that requires also a system in the background that, enables the administrators not to save their passwords, in an Excel sheet and share that between the colleagues, but to have something proper, modern, and obviously more secure. And in the old analog world, that has been solved. The problem is solved for a very long time. So just imagine you check into a hotel. Quite easy scenario. You check into a hotel, and in that hotel you have different rooms. Just like you have different servers and different applications and all the other stuff in your IT. You have the guest rooms and the conference rooms and the sauna, the fitness club, the wardrobe, the safe, and many more. So for instance, if you check in as a guest in that hotel, you will get a hotel card and you can access obviously your room, but not the conference rooms. And even, if you, participant in a conference, you will not be able to open up and close the doors because your card, is only valid for your room. You can call the receptionist. And say, I'd like to go to the fitness club and to the sauna tonight. Is there anything I have to do with my card? And then obviously the receptionist says, no, nothing to do with you. I've just booked it on your card. You're free to go now. Okay, and then you go down, to the sauna. Just imagine that would be possible in IT too. So not only you're a guest in that hotel, you might be the manager of the hotel. And you can see that in every, bad thriller when George Clooney and, in Ocean's 11 is stealing the manager's hotel card in order to get access to a room. But the question is, why the hell should the manager be able to enter, a guest room? And you have different persons in that hotel, right? You have the managers, you have the personnel, you have the cleaning services, you have, not the raftsmen, but the craftsmen, I forgot to see here, taking care of, broken stuff. And obviously you have guests. What you experience usually, you are a guest and you have a card for your room. And just imagine that would be possible in IT too. You are, just a workload. You're just a worker that does some, required jobs in the company that does not require you to have access to anything at all. So obviously there must be a system in the background that takes care of, separating all that stuff and bringing it together on demand, just like the guest in the hotel saying, I'd like to access to the sauna. And then it's being booked on your card. So just imagine having a system that requires you as an Oracle administrator just in time access to the Oracle database, not obviously to the content of the database, but just over the proper management work. And then when the work is done, bang, your rights are vanishing again, so that even you as an Oracle administrator get your card stolen or your identity or your credentials stolen, you're not being breached, because the moment you have done your management job, you're losing your authority and obviously the rights to do anything on the Oracle stuff again. So hey, very clever system that operates in the background and is operating for that. Okay, so what now, right? So it looks like a very confusing thing. So what access to take here on the PAM journey? So what we consider here and what we are saying is, well, we have developed for you as a customer to find a starting point and an end point on that PAM journey. Where are you right now, and where would you like to be? And obviously, hopefully you're not just like that poor guy here that, even on a BBC broadcast transmission, posts his password on a yellow sticker on the machine in the background of him, so that every idiot that's watching the movie here or the documentation can log into the system. So hopefully you're not in the analog world, but we consider the analog world not to be the yellow sticker world. We consider the old analog world the world where manual passwords are being given away and being tracked on a very manual way. And many companies are doing that, right? So you have service crafts and craftsmen getting into your company, just to streamline, the rules on your firewall, right? So you have your consultancy that streamlines the rules on your firewall. So that means what? You create an account for that consultant and manually create that and manually take it away. And hopefully, obviously, you take it away. What we see in the background that, every once in a while in POCs and in demos with customer, we find out and realize that, these accounts are never being deleted anymore. These accounts are valid forever. So the longest we've ever found was 29 years old. And you realize that, hopefully not, but in most data center I've seen, in your data center as well, because there's always, in the upper left corner on that data center, a rack where very old equipment is running. And when you point to that rack and say, what's working on that machine? This looks for me to be very old, and even the connectors, I can't realize. Even me working in the IT industry now for 30 years, don't realize the connectors that machines are attached to. Usually 80% of the customer says, I have no idea, but the moment we turn it off, everything is failing and stops operating. So the old analog world. Then obviously we should be moving into the basic world, and this should be your first step in the PAM journey. Automated discovery, how many accounts you would have. And this is very interesting, because usually you would think that if you would have 1,000 employees, you would have, let's say, 1,000 accounts. But in reality, we see that a company with 1,000 employees is running between 5,000 and 7,000 accounts. So where the hell are all these accounts coming from? And these are coming from different sites, right? So you never delete accounts. Machines are having accounts. Applications are having accounts. Applications are talking to machines. Machines are talking to virtual machines. Virtual machines are talking to applications. Applications to applications. Hundreds of accounts that are, I consider them to be undercover accounts. On the basic level, you should be seeing password vaulting, password hiding, multi-factor authentication, automated password rotation. And this is obviously a thing that everyone gets super angry about, right? So every once in a while, your system is asking you, please give me a new password. And then you're running out of ideas, right? All of a sudden, you're running out of ideas. It started with your favorite, vacation spot, and then your vacation spot 1, 2, 3, and then your vacation spot 1, 2, 3, exclamation mark, and then obviously the next vacations. So you have your own system, but that creates obviously trouble. So why don't you get to the advanced level on an automated way with tools in the background that we could provide? Identity consolidation is an important thing, right? So why do you have, you as one person, several identities in your network? You have an identity for the administrative stuff, for your PC, for your Mac, for the networking gear, for the firewalls, for the Oracle stuff, for the database shit in the background, and all the rest of that. So identity consolidation. many more. And the last step, obviously, on that level is, make it automated. Bring things together in an automated, fashionable way. And maybe this is the right point, to ask you and, bring out a little survey where you are on that PAM journey. So when you think about where you are on that PAM journey, you obviously need to think about, so now what it's all good for, right? So when you think about accounts, identities, passwords, and all the rest of the stuff, you usually start thinking of, administrators are managing stuff. So humans are managing stuff in your network and in your environment and in your data center. But there is much more that you can see on that matrix here, right? So there are, and I consider them and I call them under the radar service accounts. There are much more under the radar accounts than human accounts actually in your environment. And with under the radar account, I mean, applications in your data center, applications on the network, in the cloud, your homegrown scripting, just Johannes said in front up, the scripting, the stuff, hard-coded passwords that are there forever and you can't change any because you have no idea what scripts are running in the background. The endpoint environment and obviously IT and IoT. And there are service accounts as well, remote workers, consultants coming from the outside, companies taking care of your machinery park and all the rest of that. So many more under the radar service accounts than you might think of what you thought in the first phase, that humans are managing machines. And then obviously the whole idea around cloud infrastructure. Many more, and even now here in our region and the DACH region, especially in Germany, companies are considering, sourcing out computing power and applications into the cloud. So what about all the cloud accounts? And it's not only companies, doing this on purpose. These are employees doing that. So employees need stuff to get done in order to get their job done. So, as you as an employee might not service that application, they look around on the cloud and, sign up on a website, that does the stuff and, get the work and the shit done. So the whole cloud infrastructure is a huge thing where many identities are floating into and needs to be considered, obviously. And then obviously the whole DevOps environment. So just last year, the biggest scandal in the IT security world occurred when SolarWinds got hacked and breached. And it was not SolarWinds that got hacked and breached. It got, all their 18,000 customers hanging in the background got breached as well. And that had to do with a, weak password that was set up, hard-coded in the code of SolarWinds. And the password was SolarWinds123, right? And that brought us into a scenario where we could read unbelievable things about 18,000 customers that got breached with millions of employees and data in the background. Johannes, how do you think, this is operating from a practical thing and from your view as a consultant?
Yeah, based on that, what you have said the last couple of minutes, the target pictures should be a zero trust and least privilege design based on PAM. So don't take it personally, but we trust nobody. So the access a person have should not be personal or should not be related to a person. So with the implementation of PAM, we separate the privileged accounts from identities and implement a roles and rights model based on least privilege. So a database administrator does not need access to any Windows systems on a admin level, and of course, a domain admin don't need admin rights for each task he is performing. So with the integration of a PAM solution, every person which needs privileged accounts for the daily work or for special tasks will be assigned to a role, and this role will give him access to the privileged account he needs. And this is done for Thycotic in a folder structure or with CyberArk in a safe structure. And there you grant persons access to accounts or to privileged accounts, and they can use it. But they only can use it. They cannot see the password. They cannot check out the password. And if they leave or log out from the PAM solution, they don't have access anymore from their local machine to the target device without logging into the PAM solution. And of course, this is a big step for most companies, and it's a too big step for most companies to implement it in one RAW, and that's the reason Stefan said to split it into several steps. Begin with, hey, what privileged accounts we have, how do we classify them, who needs the accounts, and what target systems or target applications we have, and then in a second step, activate automatic password rotation, and so on and so on. And at the end, the target design is that administrators and persons who have to work with privileged accounts have to log on to the PAM system to use these accounts and access privileged or use privileged access to target applications or target machines. And additionally, for audit reasons, all activities must be recorded and monitored. So there's a session recording in a target design, which is monitoring and recording all activities, and an advanced level rate the activities with a risk score based on keystrokes or something, and especially for banks which have to prove that their administrative and privileged access and accounts are secured. This is a feature which has to be implemented. So at the end of the day, all access goes to PAM, and PAM is managing the access to the target systems.
Absolutely. So you started talking about features, and recording and monitoring is one of those. So with Thycotic, you are able, to answer exactly the question the auditor might ask you, and that question could have been, who changed that firewall on August 17th last year? Because that brought you into the situation that you are, very, very vulnerable, and obviously you need to come back with an answer. So how would you ever be able to get back with an answer of who changed, the firewall rule on August 17th, 19 or 2021? And the answer is very easy. And you need a system that's recording and monitoring the stuff in the background. Recording in terms of, what had happened in the past, and monitoring in terms of, you might have, 6 or 7 people sitting, as a kind of consultant service in your system right now and doing stuff. And you obviously must have the red button that you can, hit, to stop the operations that might be, coincidentally or willingness, fail your system. So talking about features, how does it work? What does PAM mean, in a real world environment? So the first thing is, we obviously have to take care of, and we have already spoken about, the 6, 7, 8, 10,000 different spots where a company with 1,000 employees is storing their passwords. So the first task obviously is, deleting and taking away all that different password stores and bring that password store in one repository together. Okay, so taking away all the accounts and all the stuff that's got stored in my Apple keychain, in Google Chrome, in Safari, and all the rest of the systems that you might have and operating with on an individual base, delete them all, export them all and bring them all together in one repository. Okay, so first step is bring it to one point that you can control as an administrative, task. So having them in one point, you can now obviously bring the user in a very comfortable situation, logging on not to different and 100 different websites and applications and all of that, but just to that repository. Okay, bring the user in the repository, and the repository knows everything and every password and every identity, or can create them on demand for that user. Obviously, that logging onto that repository is a multi-factor, however you want to secure it scenario, to which obviously here the bad hacker will have no access to. Okay, so then from there on, you are being routed right to the services and to the machines you are supposed to work with, and not to the machines you have no access and no rights to. So very simple, eliminating all the passwords, bringing them in one repository, force the user on a very comfortable way, to access to that repository, and then a repository routes you forward to the machine. So no longer an administrator, the guy on the left, logging onto your Oracle machine. No, the Oracle administrator logging onto the repository, and the repository forwarding, the whole connection to the Oracle service. Okay, so what is the advantage of that? The advantage of that is that you have a point of control right in the middle, right? So the user doesn't have to take care of passwords, identities, and all the rest of that anymore. The user just takes care of, having the right multi-factor authentication to that repository, and the repository stores, all the stuff that's necessary for the operator or for that privileged user, in that case, the Oracle administrator, to do the stuff right on the Oracle side, nothing else. So what does that mean? That means obviously we have an automated discovery in the background, right? So how many accounts do you have? How many passwords are stored, and all the rest of that? And that obviously on an automated fashion. Automated in that scenario means, it's useless if you, do that once in a while. You have to do that regularly, obviously, to find out, whether new identities or new password came into your systems. And then obviously when you have, transferred that all in that repository, the repository can do, the stupid work. It's not the user doing that anymore, it's the repository. So the repository can find new passwords, can auto-rotate the passwords. It's not the user anymore creating and finding and, inventing every once in a while a new password for the mail accounts. It's the repository doing that on a very strong and hardened way. All the user has to do is go to the repository brings it to the Outlook service. It's not the user going to Outlook anymore. This is fantastic because you don't have, to invent and create a new password every time the server is asking you. The server will never ever be asking you anymore because it's all being done in the repository in the background. Just imagine a user, an Oracle user, having no account on the Oracle machines anymore. The Oracle user goes to the repository just on demand creates an account for the Oracle stuff to get operated. The moment it's done, the account is being deleted. That means that even, the scenario I was pointing out in the first slide, that T-Mobile lost 50 million accounts. You can lose an account because the moment you get your stuff done, the account is deleted anyhow. It's not worth anything anymore. So the next time you try to log in and operate stuff on the Oracle servers or on the Outlook or whatever servers or machine or applications you'd like to, a new account is being created, nothing for you to do in the background. So you can't lose passwords anymore. You can't, but obviously you can, but they are not valid. They are not good for anything anymore. Fantastic, right? So you're not getting into a situation where an external consultant having access to your system, needs to be created manually, needs to be deleted manually. It's automatically being done in the repository. How comfortable is that? And this is, one of the nice things when you operate in the PAM space and when you do the operations later on. It's not about how comfortable is it for the administrator and for the company to implement that, which it is. It's also very nice and very convenient for the user to operate with that because they don't have to care about nothing anymore. It's a huge burden that we take from their shoulders and put it in a repository, in a system, in a software, in a SaaS tool, in an on-prem tool, in a hybrid tool, whatever you want to like and whatever you prefer, having that repository standing for in your company and operates on your behalf. How fantastic is that? When was the very first time that you would be implementing a new system or a new security systems that's convenient for a user and not inconvenient? Fantastic. You know, very, very high, fast adoption rate from the administrator and server side. Okay, and then obviously we take care of the sessions. And with session caring, you know, we already talked about session videoing, right? So Johannes was talking about that a moment ago, that this is an important point, not only from the monitoring side, but also obviously from the compliance side. We take care of that one-time password thing, keystroke logging, you know, all the rest of that stuff, so that whenever the auditor asks you what happened on August the 17th last year, you can easily, you know, not only give the information, but show a video if you'd like to. We can create something like one-time provisioning. I've already talked about that. You know, the administrator of the Oracle machine has no access, but the moment he needs it, we guarantee the access. We create the access on the Oracle accounts. This is fantastic because that means, you know, the user, the administrator doesn't have to take about anything. It's a repository doing that, and we take care of, you know, him giving access to the machines and obviously to the applications. So how fantastic is that? So that means there are two sides of the whole PAM thing, right? So the first side is the privileged evaluation or elevation management, giving you the rights to operate your tasks just in time. This, you know, on the server side, on the cloud side, and on the endpoint side as well. What does endpoint mean in that scenario? Endpoint in that scenario means, why the hell should you be administrator of your endpoint in your machine you are operating right now? There's only one point in that point, because it's convenient, right? Because it's convenient. But convenient in that scenario means it's convenient for ransomware as well. You know, just imagine an endpoint or a system or a server or a cloud service or whatsoever, where only allowed applications are going forward and can be executed, and unallowed simply have no rights. Just imagine an environment where ransomware simply has no right to execute and encrypt a file. How fantastic would that be? That takes a lot of burden away, not only, you know, from the administrator, but, you know, just from the standard regular user that opens coincidentally or stupidly or, you know, willingly a PDF file he's not supposed to do. We all know that at the current, you know, PDF Adobe thing, there are 13 vulnerabilities open that are not being fixed. So, you know, one of the biggest, you know, threats is, you know, opening stupid stuff, clicking on links. But just imagine a system in the background that, you know, gives no rights to that ransomware you might be downloading on a drive-by. So, on the left side, you see privileged elevation just in time. Okay, just in time. That's the thing. On the right side, you see all the PAM and session management stuff, right? So secret server, creating accounts just, you know, when you need it, account lifecycle manager, taking care of, as the name already says it, the lifecycle of an account. Accounts are easily being created, but, you know, when are they ever deleted? Connection manager. Connection manager means, you know, not the administrator going through the same VPNs, just like, you know, the standard user or workers or working flows, so that they can operate even if the VPN and all the other stuff breaks. DevOps is the thing that, you know, would avoid situations like SolarWind 1, 2, 3, right? So the biggest breach that we were allowed to experience last year, with 80,000 breach customers and millions of users behind that, just because, you know, passwords were hard-coded in scripts. Just think of an environment where passwords are automatically not being hard-coded in scripts anymore and being created just on demand, and this on a platform that is, you know, an on-prem platform in your data center, a hybrid platform where the secrets and the important stuff is still being stored in your data center and all the management tasks are being operated in the cloud, or completely everything moved into the cloud. So on our side, on the Thycotic side, we come with a bunch of very helpful different tools. The first tool, the secret server, is that what I've considered in the slides before to be, the repository with all the feature sets in the background. The privilege manager, the system in the background that takes care of that ransomware has no rights to execute on your machine, but you're still being able, to set up the new printer in your home office by giving you just in time the rights to operate, the latest drivers from the HP printer stuff. And then when it's being done, you're gonna lose the rights, so that ransomware that you might be hitting on the next website you're surfing on has no rights to execute anymore. Behavior analytics, a system in the background that takes care of, what is the usual stuff being operated on a normal working day, and why is it today so strange? And what does it mean for you as an administrator and for your security situations right now in time operating that? Account lifecycle manager is obviously, we've talked about that, account lifecycle manager system that allows you not only to create accounts, but also, to say that account is only valid for the next 14 days because I only need that for a POC or a demo a customer is giving me, and then it's being deleted automatically in the background. So that avoids you from a situation where, on your Windows machines that you're not any longer know anymore, our accounts being created for 25 years and not being changed. Connection manager, we've already talked about. Cloud access control, the name stands for that, and identity bridging. And I'd like to spend the last 3 minutes of my presentation to talk about AD bridging and bridging as such. So what is a bridge? A bridge obviously combines the two sides, the two banks of a river. Okay, so talking for IT, what are the different banks of a river that could be bridged together? Whenever I talk with customers in the last couple of years, well, not to customers, but to IT departments within customers, and ask the IT departments, what are the crown jewels that you need to protect most? Most IT departments are not saying the intellectual property or the Word documents or all the rest of that. That's stuff of the daily operations. IT departments mostly consider their identities to be their crown jewels that need to be protected most. So, what are identities? It's not easy to say what is an identity because there are so many of them, right? So remember back, a company with 1,000 employees, easily in the IT department being set up 5,000, 7,000 identities. Why is that the case? So every time when I ask a customer, not only what are your crown jewels, what would you like to protect most, but how do you manage your identities? Most customers come around and say, well, we do this in our Active Directory. Active Directory is our thing where we do all the identity stuff. Okay, fantastic. So let's talk about Active Directory. Active Directory was invented with Windows 2000. And since then, got adapted in all IT departments, I would say. It's very convenient because you can, easily set up a user, move them to a group, delete a group, create a new group, have extensions in it, but can be done very easily and get adapted very, very fast. But Active Directory, is not the only directory you might be having. So then when the customer comes back to saying, we're doing this all with our Active Directory, obviously my next question is, and how do you do that with your Macintosh users, your Apple users? Well, that does not apply to the Apple world, right? We do it differently in the Apple world. Okay. And then how do you do that, with your Unix stuff, your Unix servers? Usually we do this with NIS or NIS Plus, and and how do you do this with your Linux servers? Well, etc password. Okay. So, and what about the users for your Oracle environment? Well, it's being managed by Oracle. And for the applications, well, it's being managed by the applications. And for Azure, But for Azure, we don't use, AD. We use Azure AD, and for AWS and Google and other. So in the real world, customers are always answering, yes, we are doing this with Active Directory. But then, my reply always is, when you think about all the different systems and all the stuff you have and all the inhomogeneous environment, it's more a wish, right? It's not you're doing this in your Active Directory, you wish you could do that all in your Active Directory. And this is what we can do, right? So the idea is you can manage all your applications, all your machines, all your servers, your Mac world, your Unix world, your Linux world, your device, Oracle, application, cloud stuff in your Active Directory and be translated, bridge it into the real world. Wow. So the very first time an administrator can use, their AD credentials to log into a Linux machine. The very first time that a user can use their AD credentials to log into an Oracle machine. The very first time. So what we can do now is we can bridge all these worlds together and let the company and fulfill the biggest wish of an IT department, bringing all that identity together in that one identity, repository, in that case, Microsoft Active Directory. What a great stuff. So this is, combining different ADs in one ID. This is combining different worlds in one Active Directory. This is fulfilling the wish IT departments had for a long time. Now it had become real. With this, I'd like to end that presentation and hand over, to the moderator and open up the chat for questions you might have.
Thanks, Stefan. Thank you, Johannes. Johannes, would you wanted to share something as well?
Yes.
Just giving you. So now you can share.
Okay. So hopefully you can see it. I want to add that IC Consult started a PAM journey this year, which includes a roadmap to accelerate and simplify the implementation of a PAM solution at the customer. And therefore, we created 3 packages, which includes a customized solution based on how detailed and how deep PAM should be implemented. And it fits to all kinds of starting points. And yeah, we really like to support you if you have questions related to PAM or concrete questions to implement PAM. Feel free to get in touch with Manuela or me and yeah, ask questions.
Thank you. So we have a few questions already. The first one is, isn't session monitoring and recording employee monitoring? So who would like to answer that?
Yeah, that's a question we always hear, especially within German companies with Betriebsrat. All activities are monitored and recorded, but access to these recordings and activities is always strongly restricted. So it's not the case that a person has always access and can take a look at, the employer didn't work very much. Let me take a look at the recordings if he had a lot of activities. So most customers implement approval regime or dual control to take a look at activities on monitoring. So if anybody wants to see recordings and monitoring, he has always to approve it. And also the recording, viewing, and monitoring viewing activities are logged. So everybody can see who took a look at this. And additionally, you can require a reason. So for every activity related to monitoring, you can require a reason to document it, why there was the case to look at the monitoring.
Okay. Then there's one question to Thycotic. Which IGA partners do you have?
Say again?
To you, Stefan, which IGA partners do you have?
IGA partner, I have no idea what IGA partner means in that scenario.
Maybe the attendee can complete identity and governance.
Identity and governance, yes. So a lot of them, right? So first of all, it's about how are we seeing ourselves, right? First is how are we seeing ourselves? Are we SOC compliant? Are we SOC 2 compliant? How are we storing the stuff in the cloud? And I can guarantee, yes, that's all applied, and we all apply to that regulatories. Number two, how can we help customers to get there too? So for instance, we have our own reporting and appliance module for SOX compliance. We have NIST compliance. We have GDPR compliance that we can roll out as well, and all the rest of that stuff. So just with GDPR, this is a very important one, because this gives you on a one-click scenario reports that can be exported and given to your auditor, and help preventing, the auditor, bringing you in the situation that you don't like to have. So I'll give you a good example. So the first fee that was spoken out from the European government by violating GDPR 2 years ago was a hospital down in Portugal. So it turned out that that hospital had accounts, and I'm talking only about PAM space, obviously, because this is our field. I'm not talking GDPR in general. So that hospital had given out 1,980, so shy to 1,000 accounts with the ability to access patient data as the doctors. Okay, but it turned out that that hospital only had 300 doctors. So what happened, right? So 300 doctors were working for that hospital, but 1,000 accounts with the access grants of a doctor taking care of and reading and manipulating patient data. So, scenarios like that can easily be found with our GDPR compliance modules, and can be applied very, very easily, on customer sites. Mm-hmm. Hope this answers the question.
He also wrote that, from a partner point of view, like SailPoint, Savient. So are you cooperating with one of these?
Yes. So a lot of, well, obviously it's not only Active Directory that I have been talking about the last slides, but many, many more, right? So on top to that, we just did a common, extension of our solution for bigger customers on proper and customer requests. So we're very open to that, but many are already built in. Mm-hmm. So yes, SailPoint is just one of them. Mm-hmm.
Good. Any other questions?
I hear in the Bavarian city already hearing the church bells ringing the 12 o'clock tone. So looks like that we landed, on the second, on the hour. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Exactly. So I would say any other questions that will come up, just write me an email or write Stefan or Johannes an email, and we are definitely answering it as soon as possible. And thank you for your interest and your time today. Many thanks again to Stefan and Johannes for the insightful session. And yeah, you will get the recording from me as soon as I have it prepared as an email, and then you get it from me. And then, yeah, I wish you all a nice rest of the day. Stay healthy and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Ciao. Bye-bye.